Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your forever hosts.
I am John.
And I'm CC, and when there's just too much cool anime to watch, we've got you covered. Today's episode is all about the different facets of immortality. First, we'll discuss what's happening in the second season of To Your Eternity and see what the immortal being Fushi has been spending his everlasting life on. And after that, I will talk about how the lust for immortality ruins the lives of a bunch of people in the sixth season of My Hero Academia. And since it's our season finale, we of course will give you our picks for best of the season. Sounds like a supersized episode that you might or might not have to achieve immortality for to listen to from beginning to end. So go and try to figure out how to procure the gift or curse of eternal life. But you'll only have a couple of seconds because, as usual, we'll be right back.
Alright, so the first season of To Your Eternity was an interesting watch, I feel like. You know, sort of this, what's the word to best describe it? Sort of this introspective view on what it's like to be immortal and also to have, you know, superpowers, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I was expecting it. I said it in our review of it. I was expecting a wholly introspective journey thing, which looks at, hey, humanity with all its upsides and downsides, with all its assets and its flaws. But we also got some cool action scenes. So that was neat and a surprise, and I like that a lot. It wasn't like the main draw. The main draw were the great characters, the interesting story structure with our main character Fushi, first of all, being an immortal being that grows and becomes more human every time he assimilates a new body and spends more time with new people. But also, you know, having these different segments where it's like, hey, now he meets this person, and then a couple of years pass, and then he meets another couple of people, and then more years pass and stuff like that. And that's what I expected would continue into the second season, where it's like, hey, we get a couple of mini arcs again, and Fushi's gonna meet a bunch of new people, and then that gets switched out, and we meet a new cast of characters. Yeah, but that's not what we got here in the second season, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Full spoilers, by the way. This is a continued series review, so of course, everyone, if you haven't seen this show and you're interested in it, watch it, because we're gonna spoil the shit out of it, so be aware of that.
Yeah. So we kind of start with seeing Fushi like several decades later.
Yeah. I thought he was, like, his body got older, but because that's what he looked like at the end of the first season. But apparently he just grew a beard.
I think it's implied there is a time skip, I think.
There is a time skip. It's 40 years. Like,
okay,
we had a 40-year time jump. But I also thought at the end of season 1, when we see Fushi, like, with the beard and everything, he looked much older there. But at the beginning of this season, it looks like it's just, you know, the same young Fushi. So
I mean, we see a little bit of the older for a minute, as I recall.
Maybe, but I don't know. Something about this looked not as old as it was at the end of the first season. That I was like, when we got to the end of the first season, I was like, oh, this is interesting. So he's actually gonna try to grow old with other people, maybe, but not necessarily. It's not what he's doing, and so.
I mean, his aim is to kind of isolate from society.
Yes. John, why does he decide to do that? Because that's apparently what he did for 40 years.
Well, it's because after dealing with the knockers in the first season, they seemed to be attracted to his presence. Mm-hmm. So by isolating himself, he can draw the knockers away from the rest of civilization, or so he thought.
Which is not an entirely, like... there's not an entirely altruistic motivation to this. This is the main reason why he's doing it, but it's also seeing so many people get hurt and die in his presence, and he being, since he's an immortal, the only one that, or one of the few people who gets out of the encounters with the knockers and other negative forces alive, that really takes a toll on him. And this season goes into that more over the course of its runtime. Which is understandable, right? That's something you would have to probably deal with if you are an emotional being who can relate to other people. With Fushi, at the beginning of the first season, he can't really. But he has become that at this point. So making friends and then seeing them pass on, and sometimes violently, is, of course, very taxing, to say the least.
I mean, he's definitely far more human now than he was previously, because of his exposure to other people and getting to know them and making friends and having a makeshift family, as it were. Yeah. And then, seeing all of that slowly getting taken away while the knockers attack, and he just sort of takes on their memories as opposed to getting to live on with them. Yeah, that'd probably really mess you up a bit, whether or not you're immortal. Mm-hmm. So he disappears to his own island, and when he finds out that the knockers are attacking other settlements and civilization, he's got work to do.
And first he encounters, one of the descendants of his... I guess if he had an arch nemesis in the first season, it would be Hayase.
Yeah.
So, her granddaughter. What was her name? Hisame? I think? Yeah. Little girl who also inherited a knocker from her grandmother, which apparently is now in the Guardians, this group who has decided to spread Fushi's legend and also protect him / control him, own him. As was Haya's...
it's really weird.
I mean, let's just
put that out there now.
Yes, I mean, this is coming from a horrible person. Like, the whole motivation of these remnants of the Yanome people, like the Guardians, the religious fanatics, and, she kind of retooled that to her interest, whereas because she... I don't even know what her main drive. She wanted to achieve her own version of immortality, I guess, by bonding with Fushi, right?
I think she wanted to do more than just bond with him.
Yeah. No, I mean that in the carnal sense.
But let's not bury the lead here. She wanted in his pants.
Yeah, and her descendants still want to do that. Like, that is their main goal, to get Fushi to bear to father a child with one of the descendants of Hayase, to be part of his legend. I don't know. It's a weird religious fanatic thing, as those things are. They don't necessarily have to make sense, but that's what they're trying to do. And Hayase has, on her, when shortly before she died or whatever, or to prolong her life, she had fused with a knocker who also gets passed down through the generations, and is also in Hisame's body at this point, and in her left arm. In fact, it gets transitioned to all the further descendants in that. Also, it stays in their left arm. And when that was revealed, I was already like, kill it. Get rid of it.
No, come on, man. It's part of the Guardian's legacy. It has to stay. Shut up. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
It was
we
ridiculous.
Live with the knockers. It's completely safe. This will not be a problem.
It's a giant problem.
No,
anyone can see that. I was so weirded out by Fushi being like, hey, you should get rid of that, but I will listen to you, little girl who says it's your dear friend and it will not act against you. Like, yeah, sure. You can't even control it now. What do you... Ridiculous. I mean, to be fair... John?
This little girl trying to hit on Fushi, too. It's like, this is uncomfortable, man.
I mean, that it could have been very uncomfortable if she stayed around for too long. Thankfully, that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
it's like only a couple...
it keeps happening.
I mean, she doesn't stay around for long. It's like a couple of episodes, and then she's out of the show, right?
Yeah,
and
no, that's true.
We see a couple of the further descendants, but Fushi always pushes them away. But yeah, they have a specific goal. They want to be with him. That gets mixed up once we meet the sixth descendant, and who stays in the story much longer and has a very important part to play. And the knocker that is fused with the arm of the Guardians has also an important part to play. But that only gets revealed at the very end. Like, there was still a thing for that thing to an important thing for that thing to do. But up to that point, I was like, why is everyone too stupid to kill this fucking thing? It has caused so much damage already. What is the problem? You cut up so many of these fucking weird tentacle brain thingies. Cut out another one and cut that guy's arm off. It's fine.
This one's different, I promise.
Yeah. I mean, it is different, kind of, in a way, but not enough. Yeah. I mean, it has a different motivation, right, than the rest of it, brethren, which is an important thing. This is one of the things we learned finally in this season, what the motivation of the Knockers are. We didn't know that in the first season. We knew that they were out to get Fushi and steal all of his bodies, but we didn't know exactly why, what their main goal is, and why they also attacked humans and stuff like that. Like, what were they actually after? That wasn't revealed to us in season 1. It was one of the big mysteries. And that gets resolved in this season, as many other things are, kind of. And basically their motivation is, we need to set this up, actually. In this season, the concept of Phi is introduced very shortly, and after that, it's not much talked about, really. But what Phi is basically the soul of things, of people, of animals, whatever. Once a body breaks, the Phi is free to go where it wants to go. And that's also part of the thing, how the shit with Hayase works. Like, her fanaticism was so strong that her Phi, via a knocker, moved into the bodies of her daughter and granddaughter and further descendants, and basically conveyed her will to the future generations. So they were still kind of under her spell through that mechanic. Because her soul just was so strong that part of it could remain in her descendants. And the knockers apparently are Phi, are souls in a way, just without proper bodies. And their thing is, they're like, hey, having a body, being an actual, being with a decaying body, quote unquote, is pain, is suffering, and we want to absolve everyone from suffering. And we're out for Fushi because he's immortal, so he's the complete antithesis of this. Because his body is everlasting, so his pain is everlasting. So we have to free him and have to get rid of him because he's the one who can stop us with his immortal body. So that's their thing. That's what they're trying to do. And this season kind of becomes like this big contest game thing where it's like, hey, we're just gonna go at some point and try to send everything we have at Fushi and try to destroy him and rob him of his bodies. Although they have different angles that they're working on. One that is incredibly obvious to anyone, where it's like, get rid of this thing. It's obviously a plan by the knockers. Why are you keeping this around?
I keep telling you, it's fine.
It's obviously a trap. But yeah, so that's the setup for this, basically. After we have this small setup arc where it's like, hey, here we see a couple descendants of Hayase. We meet Tonari again, the girl from the last arc of the previous season, shortly before she dies. And she saves Fushi's ass quickly from Hisame. And she becomes another one of the bodies he can adopt. After that, what happens after that, John? We get another time jump a bit.
I believe notes are to be believed. That's about when Fushi meets Kahaku, and he's the latest of Hayase's descendants, and he's the only male successor so far, and they sort of have this big to-do about whether or not, hey, do you think it's all right for, a man to be in love with another man, and I'm just like, oh boy, here we go.
I mean, that was interesting, right?
It was, but I just was kind of like at the way it was sort of presented.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the presentation in this season.
Yeah.
But yeah, this season is a mixed bag. I'm just gonna say this. Like, it's story-wise, presentation-wise, it's a pretty big downgrade compared to the previous season. Like, we switched studios. Some of the stuff stayed the same. We got the same series composition, same script writer, but we have a different director. I think still the same composer, but different animators, episode directors, and stuff like that. So, wait, who's the new studio anyway?
Drive. They've done a lot of like in-between animation for shows, but the stuff that they can claim as theirs, stuff that will actually, have a name that we would recognize would be Konosuba Season 3 and Konosuba the Megumin spinoff, I think it is. And then they've done stuff, little things like Demon Slayer, Fate Grand Order, Slime Time. They've worked on a little bit. But yeah, they seem to be mostly an assistant studio. But
yeah, that shows in my opinion. I mean, the animation in itself is not necessarily super bad or anything, but it's like, if you've watched the first season, which of course had also some low points where it's like, okay, this looks a bit stiff and everything, but it was really good at putting the effort where it needed to be, which was in the fight scenes, and then some key emotional scenes where it needed to look really good, right? It's like, okay, we need to put some effort in the character animation here, in the facial animation, stuff like that, because heavy emotions are conveyed here, and we need this to look good. And they really did good work in managing and distributing the workforce there, I feel like. Because that season looked surprisingly good, and especially most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, the big action scenes also looked really, really good. Strong action direction. And again, in the key emotional moments, which there were a lot of in the first season, also looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, Brainspace does great work, and it seems strange that they didn't stay on to do this, but I guess money talks, because they went on to do Golden Kamuy instead.
Yeah, and maybe, it was that. Maybe they had that on their plate before a second season for this was greenlit, and they didn't want to back out of Golden Kamuy or whatever. Who knows? But they didn't do this season, and it shows, in my opinion. And it is a downgrade, where it's like you have a lot of seasons. I mean, the latter half of the season, or at least the last couple of episodes of this, and we get to this, kind of become this big battle. Yeah. And this needed to look as good as season 1. This needed to look really good, and it does not. Like, not at all.
It doesn't, and I don't know if I should wait to say this, but I had another issue with it as well.
Yeah, we get to that. We'll try to go through this a bit chronologically so that we don't leave anything out. But yeah, you mentioned Kako. We get to him. I also want to, notice some high points because there will be enough of dunking later parts of this. But yeah, like we said, Fushi isolated himself because, after Piran's death, which was a very important person to him, he learned a lot from her. She was basically like his grandmother. Like, he couldn't bear to meet new people anymore, just to see them eventually all die. And, because he has to suffer through this many more times over. And of course, he blames himself, like you said, for some of the dying, because some of them dying because he involved them in his fight with the Knockers. But, Tonari, who he meets again, here on her dying bed, convinces him that he needs friends by his side to help him fight the Knockers and just live a life worth living, basically. Several arrows are better than just one, I think is her phrasing. And that becomes one of the big underlying themes of this season, where it's like, the first season was more like, yes, making friends, but also seeing them go away again, and only their memories remaining basically in Fushi's body, but not themselves. But this season is also more about, like, building up, people around you that can support you, that you not only support by being there yourself, so that you don't have to carry the whole burden, since Fushi carries a lot of weight on his shoulders. His mission as well, right? That he gets from God, Mr. Black.
The Beholder apparently is the official name.
Yes.
But let call a spade a spade. It's God.
Yeah, whatever. Some kind of godly entity anyway. And that is, to basically learn everything there is to learn about the world and become like this living library, I guess. At least that's his statement that person gives. If that is really the thing that they want from Fushi, that is not even clear by the end of the season. They seem to have a hidden agenda. That one of the characters, new side characters, seems to kind of like have found out and seems to understand, but they haven't revealed that to us yet. So we'll see. It might be something for the third season, which has already been confirmed to be in production. So there's that. But yeah, this season,
different season or different studio
again.
Hopefully.
Oh yeah, definitely. Maybe it will go back to Brain Space. We will see.
Well, that leaves the question to remain: who's going to be working on the final episode? Guys, right. I swear I can talk. Who's going to be working on the final season of Golden Kamui? Because if it's Brain Space again...
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe that will go back to... what was the original studio?
Geno Studio?
Geno Studio. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it could.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe it's gonna be a big shift again. But yeah, so one of the most important parts in the first season was the key emotional moments. And the second season has this again. Like, for example, the scene where Fushi turns into all the people he has met when he talks to Tonari. Especially when he gets to the people he couldn't turn into before and thus realizes that they are now dead, like Reen, the old man, and Gugu's brother. That's a really powerful scene because, he hasn't thought about that before, but now he can turn into these people and he's like, oh shit, they're dead. Of course they're dead because it's several years later. But it still hits him like a truck. It shows that Fushi is that stuff still gets to him. And you would assume that someone who has lived so long at this point, I think he's 240 years or something old at this point, that they would become hardened towards this, but Fushi hasn't. Like, he is still this really emotional and very human being who gets touched by these kind of things. Seeing people he has met and he has befriended in one way or another leave his life, and not being there anymore and realizing that. And that was a nice, powerful scene. I like that a lot. I wish it looked better. Which I will be saying a lot during this review. But yeah, that was a good scene. What did you think about it?
I thought that was, it was great. It gave weight to, the fact that everyone he knew and loved they're gone. And it shows that he, that he has maintained some of that humanity in spite of, all the time that's passed and all the stuff that he's seen and dealt with. So, and
isolating himself, right? That can also do something to your mind, but apparently he's still as empathetic. So that's good. Problem in these first couple of episodes I saw immediately was the pacing, which was way too quick for my taste. Like, the dialogue, the editing, they are on fast forward and no scene gets to simmer a bit. Maybe that one scene I just mentioned, but also not as much as I wanted it to be. And the decreased animation quality doesn't do the presentation any favors either, like we said. So that was one of the things that completely gets turned around with it being too quick towards the later half of the season, which in my opinion moves way too slow. Or the middle part, maybe, I would say. So, yeah, the pacing in this season is incredibly uneven. And I don't know what the reason for this is. I don't understand it really, because, yes, we got a new director, but we have the same writer. It's based on the same manga. So, was it all director's fault? I mean, Kyoko Sayama has directed other stuff. So, I'm pretty sure she knows her way around things.
You would think that.
Yeah, but it's super weird, especially when you compare it to the first season. Despite it having 3 and a half or 3.25 arcs felt really even paced. It felt like all the arcs got the time they needed to have to tell their stories. And here it's super weird. Like the first arc with the Hisame, where Fushi meets her different descendants, moves past super quick. And once he meets Kaku, the sixth one, that's when we basically stop time, and then it moves very slowly. He meets a lot of new people, of course, but time doesn't really progress as fast as it did before, and it becomes less of a, hey, we traveled to different time periods and different facets of humanity, which I expected we would get like we would. I expected Fushi to stay a bit more in this now medieval-esque European setting, and then maybe move over to a bit early, I don't know, early 20th century after that, maybe, which we are getting maybe in the third season, apparently, who knows? But, something in between also. And yeah, we didn't really get that. Once they get to this part of the story, where we get to big castle towns and stuff like that, and kings and princes and stuff like that, the story kind of sticks with the same characters that are being introduced from that point for the rest of the season. And that's like 17 episodes of this? Well, the first season had like I said, like 1/3 of the show, of the season, was distributed to one arc. And in this, it's like a quarter at most, 1/5 maybe to the first thing, like finding Fushi in his isolation and getting him back to humanity. And after that, it's one big arc, one continuous arc for the rest of the season. And that's not what I expected from the show. That doesn't necessarily make it bad, but I don't think it's what I wanted from this show.
Yeah, they kind of turned it into this big struggle as opposed to, the pensive sort of, we get to see different places, we get to meet different people in the in the first season. That was interesting. And this is just like, it's almost like the author had this giant pivot and it was like, well, it needs to turn into this battle thing. And maybe that was a publisher decision. I don't know. But it's just like, it really kind of betrays the story and how we got to know all of the characters from the first season. And it never really feels good, man. Yeah, until I would say to the very end, we get to that, and then we get kind of a climactic moment that feels kind of, all right, now I get what they were trying to build towards. But it was like, there was a better way to get to there, right? There was a more gripping, emotional, satisfying way to get to that point, and this is not it. And yeah, that's what I felt like. Doesn't say there aren't interesting things that are happening on the way, but overall it was like the structure of the first season and what it was doing with this concept of an immortal being basically being around forever, not being able to die, and meeting more and more people, learning more and more about the world, and making up its own thought about it, her. That was a very interesting part. And also, looking through the eyes of that person at humanity. And we get part of that in the season, but it's also a lot more like, hey, here are these characters, and now we need to set up for this battle, and that now we're gonna have the battle. And that's it for 17 episodes. That's what we're getting. That's all we're getting. And not all of these characters are necessarily great, which is not a thing that I was saying about the first season, where it's like, hey, I like all of these to varying degrees. The last set of characters was maybe the least interesting one, but it was still an interesting setting where all of this was taking place with the prison island, with this fucked up political system, right? Yeah. That was really cool. Just that was a good idea arc. The other one was good. The other arcs were good character-focused arcs. So that season 1 had a lot of stuff to give. Season 2, yeah. But yeah, we have some interesting things on the way. One you already teased. When we meet Karaku, who is the first man in the line of descendants from Hayase,
he's like, well, don't worry about it, Fushi. I'm gonna stick close to you, but I'm not gonna try to make any
advances
towards you because I'm into girls. Well, Kaku didn't account for the fact that Fushi is able to transform into girls. So promptly, when they try to stay incognito from one of the new antagonistic factions, the Church of Bennett, Fushi turns into switches to the body of Perona. And promptly
suddenly I'm interested.
Kaku falls like head over heels for her. Which is, yeah, we've seen this before. But it brings up an interesting topic that the show hadn't really tackled yet up to that point. We always call Fushi a he, because his base form is that of a boy man, /man, since that's the first human he touched and transformed into. But he can become anything he wants. So also any sex he wants. So I wonder, what he'd actually identify as if you'd ask him. And he hasn't made a final decision on that by the end of this season, I would say, though he seems to lean more towards being male. And I think he also says that at some point, although he gives like a small modifier where it's like, yeah, I think I'm leaning more towards being a man, but only because I've been a man the longest. I haven't given it much thought, really. I think that's his statement on the thing. So I wonder. It's just an interesting topic. The problem is the show doesn't do enough with it. It's like it barely touches this to have to set up why Kahaku is falling for Fushi, although he is a man and interested in girls. And that's why what they use that for. And they do some interesting stuff with where Kahaku is trying to force Fushi into thinking that they could become a couple or whatever, and he thinks Fushi could be actually in love with him, but that's not the way Fushi feels. He's actually sickened by it, but mostly because he's inhabiting Parona's body, and Parona got killed by Hayase, Kahaku's ancestor. So it might be her body revolting at the thought of being involved with Kaku and stuff like that. All interesting topics, all interesting stuff. The problem is they bring that up and then they don't resolve that. Like, not really. Like, they bring up this topic and it's like, oh, this is super interesting. I don't know, maybe we'll talk about how Fushi is kind of like this non-binary being, right? And maybe one of his interesting journeys is, do I actually want to live my life as a man or as a woman? Is that something I'm interested in to find out? Is finding love something I'm interested in? Is finding out who I love, what I love? Am I more in love with men, women, or both? Right? That could be an interesting journey in this series. It's a valid journey. It's a valid discovery topic for this kind of series and for this kind of character. But the series doesn't really go into that, except for bringing it up in this plot context, because we need Kahaku to stick around. Aside from his mission thing, we also need him to emotionally relate to Fushi, and that's how we do it. And that's kind of the only thing they use that for, except for also saying like, hey, that's also the reason why Fushi is not really interested in that and not getting really into that is because the one body that Kaku is falling in love with in the beginning, Parona, is disgusted by the mere thought of being together with a person like that.
It's weird, though, because he seems like he kind of goes back and forth, like, dude, if you want to have a bisexual awakening, okay, fine, but can we get your story straight?
Yeah, it's a bit
it rings
wishy-washy.
Yeah, perfect. Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's like, hey, here's food for thought, but we're actually not going to make a statement on this with this interesting concept, on this interesting concept, and with our interesting character, who is like this unique opportunity to actually look at this topic in a very interesting way, because we have a character here who can be both. I mean, everyone can be both technically, right? If they feel like that, if they know what they are. But this is like an immortal being who has also a lot of time to figure this out and look at the different facets of humanity, and just doesn't know, like, from the get-go. They don't know what they are. And nobody's actually forcing them to be anything. Like, society doesn't care if Fushi is man or woman. That's completely different from our society, where we're trying to put the people into these little drawers and try to force them into something maybe that they don't want to be. But this character doesn't have to do that. They don't have to fight against certain rules that were made up for him, her.
Right.
So they could choose their own way very easily, because they don't have to adhere to all the human rules. So that would have been super interesting. It would have been super interesting to explore this properly. The show doesn't do that. So that was kind of a downer, because I was really kind of hyped when the show brought that up. It's like, oh, are we going to go here? Oh, all right. I'm on board. I'm interested. This is an interesting topic, and this is an interesting character to do this with. Do it for one episode or two, and then that's it.
That's a nice idea. Throw it in the garbage.
Yeah. So yeah, it feels like wasted potential, right?
I wonder if it's explored more in the manga.
Yeah, I wanted to, and maybe in the third season, right? Maybe we'll get more of this. This story is not over, so
that's true.
Could still be getting something, but for now, they seem to be, or for the rest of the season after these 2 episodes where they kind of tackle this topic, they don't seem to be interested in dealing with that anymore, in favor of doing plot, right? And having some other character stories that are not necessarily as interesting. So that's what we're getting. And yeah, that was a bit of a bummer. But it's nice, Fushi, seeing Fushi like experimenting with his body, with the way he lives. Like, he has still trouble making friends. Like, there's this nice quote in the 2nd or 3rd episode, or nice is the wrong word. It's kind of actually disturbing, and you feel incredibly sorry for him. But he says, even when I found people who might understand me, when I thought about having to watch them die, I couldn't go on. What's left after they die is what becomes my friend. So their memory, their body, right?
Right.
We can't come to understand each other, and even if I can talk to them in my head, they only respond in the words, I know. These were the only friends I had. That is so sad, good lord. That is, wow. But yeah, that's what we see him like. So it's nice. That's one of the nice things of the season, to actually see him by the end of the season. We realize he has accumulated a bunch of friends. Not only in the season, but in the previous one, and due to plot machinations, he's actually able to rejoin some of them, right? So that's nice. It's like a nice full circle thing from the beginning of the season, where he's really like in this really dark and down mood, whereas he's all alone. He has to do this all by himself, because he knows at the end, I'm going to be the only one who will be around after all these people are gone. So it's kind of nice to see him move past that by the end of the season. I will give the season that. The problem is the way it got there. Side note, must be nice just trying out to be fat for a couple of days and then changing back to your default slim form, Fushi. Must be really nice, you jackass. That ticked me off when I saw that, where he was just like hanging around for a couple of scenes as a big guy, because he wanted to find out how it was, apparently, and then he just switched back to his old slim body. It was like, you dick. We have to work for that.
It's, yeah.
But yeah, after Kaku joins him and convinces Fushi that he gets to stay around, even he has this glaring Chekhov's knocker in his arm. We meet a couple of other people. The most important one being a person called Bonchie Nikoli La Tasty Peach Uralis. That sure is a name.
He has to say it every time, too.
Well, after a while, everyone calls him Bon-chan, yeah. So that's good. Also, bird microphones. What? I thought except for the fantasy elements with the immortality stuff and everything, this was a pretty grounded series, I guess. Also in terms of its tools and everything. And then we get bird microphones. And I was like, what? Did we switch shows? What is happening? Is this a Dragon Ball show or something? Is this One Piece now?
Don't even... It's fine, don't worry about it.
Right. So whatever. But yeah, by this point we have reached European medieval times, and Bon is like the prince of not the crown prince, but the prince of the nation of Uralis, and he is capturing Fushi mainly to further his own gain. But quickly we realize that Bon is actually a good person deep down, and with a good moral compass and everything. He also can see ghosts, which is very useful. Always has a couple of sticking around. In the beginning, we think he's having like weird hissy fits or something. He's just randomly yelling and getting scared or whatever. But then we find out, he can see ghosts. So, and it becomes very important at the end of the season. And thus he also recognizes Fushi because all the ghosts of his former friends, or not all of them, but a lot of them stick around and wander around with him. And so he realizes, this must be the immortal guy. So that's how he recognizes him, and that's how he's able to capture and everything. And Fushi, even though he could escape easily, decides to go with him because it's like, hey, the church is after me, and also this guy is interesting, and maybe he can help me do the thing I need to do, whatever, right? So they come to an agreement of sorts. Fushi considers himself giving himself up to the knockers the next time one of his friends is killed, but Bon asks him to wait for him to show him a different option, right? It's like, hey, I might have a different way out of this. And yeah, he's annoying in the beginning. He has his change of character after a while, but
he initially comes across as very overbearing.
Yes, he's very flamboyant. He's very loud. He's like he wandered in from a different show, because the first season and the first part of the very first couple of episodes of this season, again, also have a very grounded feel to them, like a heavy feel to them. There are funny parts in some of the arcs. Mainly the second one in the first season has some funny parts in it, but most of it feels like a serious drama. And this one, a lot of the second season, especially the middle part, with Bon and his weird family, his sister of all things. Why? I wonder if Pourquoi, that's his sister. Pourquoi's name is actually supposed to be Pourquoi, as in why. Why do you talk like that? Why are you in so many scenes? Why are you sometimes traveling around in a barrel like Snake in a cardboard box? Why do you exist? Pourquoi? I don't know, but
I didn't even make that connection.
I didn't know why this character was in so many scenes. It maybe was showing that Bon has a family and they are just as wacky as he is. I don't know.
That, and it seemed like they were kind of trying to use her as a vehicle for moving parts of the plot forward.
Maybe. I wonder if
I don't know if
she's in the manga.
Maybe, but I don't know if they were trying to use her as like an audience surrogate. And it's like, this is one of many problems I have with the way the story is told in this show, but in this season. But know,
yes, but that whole part with Bon and his court and everything, his family, it feels so cartoony. It feels so completely opposite to what we got in the first season that I never really got used to it. It gets more serious again in the later part of the season, and then we have a few comedic bits here and there, but then again it becomes more of what the first season was, where it becomes more of a grounded drama. Not as well pulled off because, the presentation, the weird pacing, the storytelling stuff, the way they convey the story and everything is not as well done as in the first season. Feels very slapped together in parts, but it's closer to what we have in the first season. But this middle part, like the focus episodes of the first incarnation of Bond, so to speak, where it's still this wackadoo, is like, it's jarring. That is, for me, that was not To Your Eternity. There was like a completely different show. And I did not like it, John. I was like, this is not what I signed up for. I don't mind a show changing up things, but this is not the kind of mood, the kind of tone I stayed around for. That's not what I liked about the first season, because it wasn't in the first season that much. Yes, Gugu had some funny parts, but he was an inherently sad character. And it was not as goofy.
That's true, but we sort of see that Bon is also sort of an outcast within his own home because of the fact that he can speak with these spirits, and nobody believes him except for Fushi.
And that is totally the good part.
Yeah.
They also, Bon is the first character kinda also that actually sees Fushi for what he is and actually understands him and can look inside of him and look past Fushi's defenses, the walls he has erected to protect himself from further emotional harm and everything. Like, Fushi tells him a lot of things, and Bon immediately is like, that's not true. Like, you are fronting, my man. Like, I see past this bullshit. I understand you. And that's cool. That's what I love about his character. Like, that's the great stuff. The problem is all the other stuff, where it's like, here have some wacky scene where he just loses shit because ghosts or whatever, and he's being a weird theatrical character or whatever. And I don't know, these two parts didn't work for me together. I liked him more when he became more serious in the later parts of the season. I don't know why we had the first part where it's like, oh, he's coping, being kind of like the outcast by being this Shakespeare over the top person. It's like, I get that. I get that it's kind of a coping mechanism, or that's kind of like what he is deep down and what he wants to be. But it doesn't work. It's not the way it is portrayed, the way it is integrated into the story. It feels like a foreign thing that is not supposed to be here. And that maybe it sounds xenophobic or something, but it's like, it's not supposed, that's the way it, like I said, the way it's part of the story, integrated in the story, is not as elegant as it should be, and it doesn't work in a lot of the scenes that it's used in. I don't know, did you have the same feeling, or did you have moments where it's like, oh no, this is funny, or this is fine, or this works, or I get what they were doing here?
I thought it was silly for maybe a minute or two. But when you sort of start to see it is jarring at first, but when you sort of start to see that he's definitely doing this as a way of covering up, his own issues, it's like, yeah, okay, I get it, but do we need to go on like this long? Number one. Number two, isn't there a better way this could have been done? And I don't know if, off the top of my head, another way to have done that, but
yeah, I feel like there was another way. I feel like there was a better way to do this, like limit the wacky parts of him more, and I don't know, maybe have him be more of a... I feel like we got the better version of this with Gugu in the previous season, who was also an outcast, right? And I feel like that was a better character, better written, more sympathetic in the beginning, right? I mean, Bond becomes sympathetic enough in his own right. But this first version of him felt so over the top, and Gugu didn't feel like that. He felt like, hey, I'm trying to, again, cope for being an outcast with behaving a certain way, but it felt more like he belonged in that story than Bond does. Bond feels like he is from a comedy series, from a weird, funny Dragon Ball offshoot or something like that. And so is his entire family. Like, all of these characters don't feel like they belong in this story. Just the way that they are integrated in the story, and the way the tone is set for them. It never worked for me.
So you could say Bond belongs in his own bizarre adventure.
God damn it, John. But yeah, he sticks around until the end. And like I said, it gets better. It gets absolutely better. But yeah, another interesting facet that rears its head at this point is that apparently Fushi can bring back the dead by creating a new body for them that their fate can return to. But until the very end of the season, he doesn't really realize how that works, because every time he just brings a body back, it just stays a dead body. And Bond keeps the mechanic, because he has figured out the mechanics of that pretty quickly. But he keeps it from him because he's afraid that first of all, Fushi will abandon him in the beginning. Like, if Fushi finds out, he will just return to his old friends by reviving them. Hiding the truth from people to chain them to you never backfires, as we all know.
Oh, no, never.
But also, he's like, he wants to, for Fushi to keep his humanity. And he is afraid that if he tells him too early, Fushi might lose it. If he makes full use of this capability and everything. There comes a part of that where that is kind of actually at risk, a valid risk, because Fushi kind of finds out by himself how to do that by bringing back 3 warriors. Bon calls them immortals, but they're not. They're actually supposed to be soldiers for Fushi that he can, when they die, revive over and over, and who can fight for him at different places in the final battle. And because they're not his long-lost friends, I guess Bon feels like, okay, if Fushi will revive those over and over and see them killed over and over, it's not going to hurt him as much, maybe. But that's still, it's tearing Fushi apart, like that part of the story. And I guess we'll get to that once we get to the big battle at the end of the season. And how that mechanic is gruesomely employed. But yeah, the big setup for the kind of final part of the season, after they have gone around, had their little encounter with the Church of Bennett, who of course considers Fushi a demon and wants to kill him, and think they have achieved that at some point because they trap him in a box of molten iron, which is also a gruesome thing, but Fushi learns to adapt and is actually able to escape, is able to rescue Bon and a couple of other characters. And once they have done that, it becomes a thing. They learn from the knocker in Kaku's arm, who has learned to ride on its own, basically with Kaku's arm, that all the knockers are gearing up to attack a certain city. They're basically baiting Fushi to fight them there. And Bon and he and the other characters actually decide to do that and try to basically fortify this city to have a chance against the knockers and try to eradicate all the knockers there. So the way they're trying to do that is by Fushi actually learning how to control a large area, not just small objects that he can generate, but actually fusing with the earth and the environment around him and being able to reshape it at his own will and repair it. Once he is connected to the environment, like once he had basically taken root in the earth and connected these roots like a plant to all the different parts of the environment around him, he can rebuild that environment like he can rebuild and form specific items up to this point, like weapons and stuff like that. So that's their plan. They're going to basically make him connect to the whole city of Renril that they get to. They make a deal with the princess there, with the king, and it's like, they don't tell them everything, of course, but they're like, hey, we're here to help you against the impending fight. And in secret, they make Fushi become like the centerpiece of the city that can control all the different parts, can protect it with different means, and can repair damaged parts and everything, can generate as many weapons as they need to, can heal people and stuff like that. So that's their big plan. And the fact that this was all building up to a big old battle was worrying to me immediately, considering the animation quality was not as good this season, or is not as good. And I also didn't like that we spent so much time in the same setting and with the same characters this season, right? Like I said, this is not what I wanted. I was hoping for a more rapid progression through the different time periods. That being said, it is neat that we get a bigger cast of characters that all get to interact with each other, because the story inevitably will move on once Fushi does. So it's not a bad choice for story and character development per se. I just like the flow and rhythm of progression in season 1 more compared to this more stagnant approach. But that's what we kind of get. We have a set of characters. We have Fushi, we have Bon, we have Kaku, but also the 3 characters that Bon recruits that will become basically human weapons for Fushi, weapons, warriors, soldiers that he can infinitely resurrect once he learned how to do that, and resurrect them in different places so they can fight in different places at once. Like Fushi also learns to make different bodies wherever he needs them at once he has taken root in the earth and connected to different parts of the environment. So he can basically use his own version of teleportation as long as all these bodies are connected to his base body through the roots. And that's interesting, but it's also incredibly fucked up because at some point the three warriors like Kai, Messar, and what was the last one? Hyro? Yes. They learn, or I think Fushi tells it to them, it's like, hey, if you kill yourself here, I can immediately resurrect you at the other end of the city.
Death through fast travel.
Yeah. I was like, what? That was so fucked up.
And then when it happens in front of people, it's like, oh, you murder. Oh, don't worry, he's fine. It's like, what do you expect people to say to that?
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I talked about when it's like, I understand what Bon's worries were. It's like, if we make full use of this ability of Fushi, then this will like tear at his humanity because you're killing people over and over again to make them fight a fight for you. But the way this is handled here, it makes it especially gruesome because we have like these three characters that have been around for a while, not as developed as I want them to be, because we barely learn anything interesting about these characters. Like, we learn a bit of background of Mesa and of Kai and of Hyro and of Bon, of course, and Bon being the most interesting one, I guess.
Like, Hyro and Kai to me were like nothing characters. Mesa was the most interesting one.
Because it's got connection to the princess and the way their game works and everything. But also, that gets quickly resolved by the princess dying and everything, so he only is a soldier at that point, right? Just like the others. There's not really much happening aside from that with him. And it felt like this season had more characters to work with, like I said, and who could interact with each other, while the first season had the other characters mostly grow through their interaction with Fushi. But here we also have these side characters interact more with each other, and that was obviously an interesting thing. But a lot of these characters are incredibly underdeveloped, and we get like a background story of like, I don't know, 2 minutes or 3, and that's it. And then their weapons. And that's doing them a big disservice, and the story a big disservice. Because then when the big emotional moments hit for some of these characters, when they inevitably die and stuff like that, these moments don't hit. They're kind of like, okay, that sucks, but also the show never gave me any reason to care that much for these characters, or as much for these characters as I'm supposed to care for them, because they are literally disposable, which also is a theme. Like, Fushi shouldn't treat them like that, and he doesn't want to treat them like that, and it really destroys him emotionally. But for us as viewers, it's like, Fushi has obviously spent more time with these characters. We only get small glimpses of them and their interaction with each other. And these glimpses are not enough. And we only get glimpses at why these people care about this fight. And it's not enough. It's not enough to get us a real feeling for these characters. We get it for Bon a bit, but we don't, like you said, we don't get it for Hyro, we don't get it for Kai. We get it a bit for Mesa, because he's related to the princess. He's her big brother, in a way, and that makes sense. But also they after a while, don't have enough interactions. And that big, sad scene with them is also not as potent and as gripping and as like stomach turning as anything we had in season 1, where like every arc, or at least the first 2, had like one scene that really got to you, that really fucked you up, and that really had you in tears. And none of the scenes, except for maybe one of the very final ones in the season, had me at that point. I was kind of like more of a passive passenger here in this season. I was not as engaged as I was in the first season. I was really engaged with the first season. Wasn't so much with this one. How did you feel about these? I mean, you already told us what you felt about Hyro and Kai, but in general, the cast of characters that we got in this. Because we got a lot more. I haven't mentioned them all, and I won't mention them all. But we got, like, Kamu and who else? A bunch of the soldiers we see, and they get a lot of screen time, but also we don't learn anything about them. And, you know, the church guide and stuff like that. And we never get any real interesting drive from them, except them being fanatics, which we already had with Hayase and everything, which was a much more interesting character in the first season. So, I don't know.
I mean, there's also that girl, Echo.
Yes, Echo. Also, another example.
Kind of there.
Interesting setup, right? She's like from this group of pod people who convey their emotions to these clay pots and everything. Interesting concept. And she's there. Fushi rescues her from a circus thing. Her brother dies and everything. But she becomes his adopted daughter in a way. And then, like, they have like a couple of interesting scenes where she does a neat thing for Fushi, like once they get to the city, and tries to get him to relax because he's been overworking himself in trying to fortify the city and everything. And she cons him into coming to eat, have a dinner with them and everything. That was a nice scene. And also, she's one of the things where the animation sometimes shines a bit, where we see her standing on top of or sitting on top of a wall and everything, and her hair is blowing in the wind. So she had some moments where the animation looked nice. But aside from that, there was just, they didn't do anything with her. Like, even a scene where she passes is like very much not entirely off screen, but it's like apropos. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, she died. I just felt that her pain ended. I was like, what? You could have handled this so much better. Like, why did you even introduce this character?
Another one of my issues, I think now is a fine time to talk about it. It's closer to the end of the season. We just have these stretches where it's just the narrator telling us things. Yeah.
Exposition
as opposed to being like, to showing it, show, not don't tell. And that might be a budget restriction, but like, come on, dude. I was watching it and I was like, this is okay. I guess these things are happening. Why can't we see these things happening, even if it's only in like stills or something? I was just like, at that point, I felt like I was really checked out.
Yeah, it felt like they really tried to focus on the plot progression and just adapted probably the manga panels. And the manga panels probably had explanation in them, because you don't have time, you don't have enough space to convey everything with just the images. I mean, you can if you're really good and know what you're doing, but sometimes mangaka chose exposition, text bubbles, and so on to convey some parts of the story. I feel that's one of the big problems that Togashi, like the guy who writes Hunter x Hunter, has, and that was plagued the adaptation of the Chimera Ant arc from the recent anime adaptation, where they just really adapted apparently the manga panels and had a narrator explain the fights to us.
Oh,
like,
no.
What's happening in the fights, where it's like one prolonged scene and the narrator's like, hey, and then Gon did this and he did this because of this, and it's like, it's all on the screen, man. Why are you explaining this to us? I can see what is happening. You're just doing this because this was in a fucking manga, because there you don't have the animation to convey the stuff that gets left out between the panels. We don't need you here. And this could be the case here as well, where it's like, yeah, you put this in here because you needed the story to progress, but you didn't want to put the time in to actually just let the animation and the just what is on the screen speak for itself. Because you want to wrap this up in 20 episodes, and you had to cut some corners from that. But also, just the plot, for the plot itself, it feels like not enough is happening in this arc. Like, Fushi tangles with the church a bit, meets a couple of people who we don't learn enough about, and then the rest of the story is, I'm gonna fortify the city, learn a bit more about my power set, and then battle happens. And that's kinda it. And that's not enough. And I feel like if they had stretched this out more, the final part, but filled it with interesting character stories where we learned more about any of these characters, give every character a real full focus episodes where we learned about their background, they have interesting interactions with Fushi, interesting interactions with the other characters, like really gripping stuff where we learn more about them and why we should care about them. Then I feel like we also could have lost the narrator, where it's like, oh, okay, I understand all of these characters. I understand what Fushi is doing. You don't need to explain all of this shit to us. Become superfluous like you were in the adaptation of Hunter x Hunter. And then just leave the narrator out. I feel like here they needed actually the narrator because they didn't give the show enough time and enough development of its character and set pieces and everything for the show to the stuff that was on screen to convey what is happening by itself. A lot of that you understand, but I feel like they didn't trust in their own story material here.
Yeah,
and the viewers, of course, to make sense of it. And there were some parts in this season where I had to take a break and was like, wait, what is happening? Because some of the scene transitions in this were really weird and really not surprising. That's not the right word. Like they came out of nowhere where it's like, okay, where are we now? What is happening? What are the characters doing at the moment? Because
I remember having to rewind several times and be like, wait, what?
Yeah, because the season didn't take its time to make the characters progress on their journey in a way that made sense in all of the scenes. And that's why they noticed that probably during the production at some point and was like, oh, we have to include the narrator here, otherwise the people won't get it, because we've already fucked up a lot of scenes and didn't include them there. So we have to put it in here or we won't be able to convey what is actually happening between these scenes, instead of actually putting more scenes in that convey that by themselves without someone talking over it. So yeah, I feel like a lot of this was just caused by this being not a good adaptation of the source material. I doubt it's as egregious in the manga because you read differently than you watch, but this needed to be handled differently because this was an anime. This is not fucking manga. So, and I feel like the show is suffering from that a lot. Just like you also said, especially when it comes to having these exposition dumps and stuff like that. But yeah, not a fan.
No.
Interesting part though, and I feel like the show made really good use of that, more so than the previous season. I don't know if we've talked about this in season 1, but the neat ad break eye catchers they put in between the scenes, in the different halves of each episode, where we see drawings of the characters who died and who Fushi can impersonate on a wooden fence. Neat detail.
Isn't it supposed to be the wall of the hut of the original Eskimo boy?
Could be. I'm not sure.
I think that's what it's supposed to be.
Yes, sure. Yeah, that's what it's styled after, because he also made drawings, right? But that wall could be somewhere else. And it's just supposed to be like, hey, these are the characters that Fushi currently remembers and that are currently a part of him. And the neat detail, when Fushi loses some of these bodies to the knockers, their drawings also disappear from that image until he regains them.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool detail.
Yeah, that was pretty neat. And they made really good use of that in this season, where it's like, oh yeah, he has lost these and these and these bodies and the memories of these people. And I don't know if we get no, we can't, because he doesn't regain all of his body until the very end. I expected them to end the season on like the wall where suddenly you see the faces of all the characters that he has bodies of and that he has memories of. But maybe they'll keep that until the very end of the series, where we see like a big screen with all of the people he has met. And it's like, hey, this was the Fushi's life, the life of an immortal. And these are all the people that meant something to him. So that will be interesting, and it's a cool idea, and it's neat. And it's also like underlines the despair Fushi must feel when he loses these important memories, because they also disappear for us. They disappear from this wall of characters. And it's like, oh no. There's one scene in the season where that wall is entirely empty, and that is cool. That's a cool aspect of this show. It was already cool in the first season, but I feel like they make a lot more use of this in this season, because there's a lot more character switching, and Fushi battles the knockers a lot more and thus loses more bodies and everything. So it's cool. But yeah, this is kind of like all what we are getting for the last quarter of the season. Like, the more Fushi tears down and rebuilds the city, the more he's connected to the emotions of the citizens, which becomes very exhausting for him since he wants to help everyone who has problems. And also people are starting to become suspicious, But when the people realize he is one of the one who helped a lot of people in the city, they stand by him and against the superstition propagated by the Church of Bennett. So that was a neat side thing. But yeah, the problem with all of this is it wears Fushi out, right? All of this. And once the battle actually starts and people start dying, and Fushi tries to be everywhere at once, and he tries to revive his soldiers, he tries to repair the city and everything, he feels all the pain of the dying people and everything. He notices, oh no, there are more people disappeared, because he can feel the entire city, he can feel all the people, and he feels when they disappear, so die. So all of this just kind of kills him emotionally. And in a moment of weakness, when problematically Kaku is very close to him, he's like, I can't take this anymore. I just want it to end. And Kaku is like, I'm going to comfort you, like the idiot that he is, and gets close to him. And as it must happen, of course, that's when the knocker in his arm activates and consumes basically all of Fushi's remaining bodies. And to the show's credit, the one moment where they actually used some of their budget, their animation budget, and was that moment.
Yeah.
It looks really good. It's like, first of all, it doesn't come out of nowhere, of course, because you see that shit coming 1 million miles away. It's like I said, Chekhov's knocker. It's like, why don't they get rid of this thing? That's the reason why. So this scene can happen. That stupid thing.
So see, it was fine after all.
But also, the severity of how that is displayed, like Fushi being torn apart over and over again, like all of his bodies being pulled in by the knocker. It looks gruesome. It's a really, really, really heavy scene. And mixed in that is the return of March, one of the first characters that Fushi meets, because he revived her body without realizing that the Fae would return to her body and she would be actually reborn. And she tries to save him. And that is a really cool scene. And that's a really good way to end that episode. Like, that was one of the few scenes where I was really engaged, where it's like, oh fuck, don't let him get close to you. Don't let him get close to you. We know what's gonna happen. And then he just starts to actually caress Fushi's cheek and everything, and he just claws into it and tears it off, basically.
Yeah.
And it looks so horrifying, and it's great. Really well animated moment, albeit utterly predictable. But good stuff. I thought that was one of the really good moments, good looking moments in this season, and that was really well pulled off. The music was really good. The music in this season was really good in general, because it was still Ryo Kawasaki doing it, and he did great work in the first season. Problem is, the music had to do like all the work.
Had to do all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, had to do all the heavy lifting because the
animation sure didn't.
Nope, not at all. But yeah, and then it's basically the last couple of episodes is March trying to help Fushi get some of his bodies back, and Bon is sacrificing himself. He's killing himself. All of that remains of Fushi is the orb from the beginning. And to revive Fushi, to give him back his memories or a body he can cling to, a memory he can cling to, Bon decides to kill himself over the orb and does trigger the orb and revive Fushi in his own body. And that works. And with this, since Fushi is fucking Mega Man, he also adapts the ability of Bon to see ghosts, and thus, which is Bon's gamble, that was his intent from the beginning. He just probably was trying to get around it and not kill himself, but that's what he was now counting on. Fushi can see all of his friends, because were sticking around as ghosts the entire time. Like, not all of them, but a lot of them. Tonari was sticking around, March was sticking around, Gugu was sticking around. The fucking bear was sticking around for some reason.
Listen. Oniguma, he was a friend. He was a friend all along.
Absolutely. He's a good boy. Like, he made friends with March as Ghost Bear, and they became ghost pals. And once he gets revived, he's like fucking up the knockers left and right, and it's great. And yeah, so that's happening, and Fushi is like, holy shit, you're all there. And then he revives them, and Gugu hugs him, and Tonari has to hug him, and March is hugging him, and that scene was great. Yeah. That was a really nice, climactic, cathartic scene. That was something that the show was building towards. Apparently, I didn't see it from the beginning. It was like, oh, this is where we were going with this. Like, he had friends all along. They were all with him the entire time. They didn't leave him alone. He just couldn't see them, but they were with him the entire time. And now he actually gets to see them. And that, of course, gives him the power that rejuvenates him. He's not doing this just for himself. He's not doing this for his mission. These people, the connections he made, they're still valid. And his power actually can give them the chance to live a life of their own again and not just for him. And that's great. And that it was a really good moment. Like, at first I was like, before this happened, I was like, all of this should hit harder. Like, the various character deaths, Fushi's despair, March's return, Bond's sacrifice, and everything. But it didn't as much as in season 1. But that moment, that being said, like that, the cathartic climactic moment of this season where Fushi, to Bond's sacrifice, gains the ability to see the ghosts and his friends and is able to remember and revive them, works really well. All of these people and one giant bear decided to stay in reality instead of moving on to heaven, which is a key mechanic. You can only revive people if they decide to not move on into the afterlife. If they decide to stay around and stay with the people that they care about. And then their fate can, once they have a body to return to, possibly a familiar body, I guess only that works, only their own body works, they will do that. And that's how it works. Like, for Fushi's sake, his friends that died decided to stick around, and thus he can revive them because he's so important to them, because he's mattered so much in their lives that this is more important to them than moving on to paradise. And that's a powerful statement. That's great. That speaks for love. That speaks for character connections, and that speaks for Fushi's humanity and what an influence and effect he had on the people in his life. Good moment. Absolutely good moment. Could have been a great one if the lead up to it wasn't so weirdly fractured. Do you agree, John?
Yeah, 100%.
But did you like that moment? Like, did it work for you?
Yeah. Yes and no. And I say only no because I feel like in storytelling there is power in death.
Oh, absolutely.
And when you take it away, it sort of like removes its meaning. So it's like, yeah, all of Fushi's friends are back. Yeah, that's nice to know. Their death didn't have any meaning to begin with. Yay. There was, I forget what it was. There was this video a while back. It was a Jeff Thu video about letting Goku die. It's that. It's always that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it kind of devalues parts of the first season, when they die and how they die, but not all of it, in my opinion. But because that still was part of Fushi's journey, that was still part of him having to learn what loss means and being so attached to characters and love characters and feeling sad, like really being emotionally destroyed by them leaving your life and everything, and being able to cope with that. And him also in the second season trying to run away from that feeling, but also still not being fully able to. In his moment of weakness, yes, someone actually tried to exploit that, but that moment of weakness would be normal for anyone. But he's still, I feel like their deaths and the time he spent with them were important to his journey and the character he became. And thus, them returning is still just, I feel like, a bit more earned, as if this was just one of those Dragon Ball stories where it's like, I'm going to revive you because I beat up the bad guy, which is not what happens here.
Yeah, that's true.
So I feel like this was more valuable. Still, I agree with you that having a revive mechanic in a show always devalues the character deaths. Not all of them, because some of them stay dead. It's not like he can revive any character, because that's not how Faye works. Because if these characters decide that they're going to leave, which I think the princess stays dead, right, because she's already moved on, and a couple of other people too. Some of them, more than others, feel like they've earned to be revived for the purpose of showing Fushi that he was not alone in his journey, that he made friends along the way and that they stuck around for him, and that his existence is not a sad, lonely, superfluous one, and that he's not only a vehicle for Mr. Black to do his mission and everything, right? He is human after all, and he did good for these people. He did good by these people, and they reward him with love and with supporting him, even in death. They didn't have to stay there, and that's they made a choice because of him,
right?
And they couldn't have made that choice if they didn't die. So that's why I feel like this is a more valuable version of this story with a revive mechanic in it. So I'm fine with it. I see your point, but I've also seen stories that devalue character deaths much more in anime. So I'm okay with it. Yeah, actually, at this point I was still, why is everyone too stupid to kill Kaku's knocker? Because they actually let him walk away with the rest of Fushi's body. It's like, what are you doing? And I assumed he still had a part to play, and he does, and I guess it's fine. He just makes a lot of bombs, then goes to the Church of Bennett, lets himself get thrown in a pool of molten iron, and then blows up the whole fucking church. It's like, okay, this is the best ending you deserved, I guess. There was a better story for you in this, definitely. There was a more interesting story for you. But I guess this is the part you had to play. I guess I should feel sad about you because you were only partially responsible for this, but you were responsible for this, so whatever. I guess that's fine. I really didn't feel anything about him dying that way, but it was good that he eliminates those fucking Bennett fanatics.
Right.
So it was okay. And Fushi, of course, then regains all of his bodies. So that was fine. But yeah, Hayase's bloodline just sucks.
Oh no, and now it's all gone. How sad.
I wonder. I hope so. I mean,
there is absolutely no way it can continue into the New World arc.
I guess not. I mean, the knocker is dead, right? That was passed on, and I feel
it's gotta be.
I mean, like part of Hayase being able to transmit her will to her descendants was the knocker being around in their bodies. I think, if I understood the mechanics correctly. So I hope this is it. I hope there wasn't another descendant along the way who, for some reason, is still trying to do the thing she wants to do. So we'll see. But yeah, Fushi becomes the mana tree, and then we see a teaser for Season 3, I guess, where we are in current time. And all of Fushi's roots have connected with all of the buildings and everything. And in the final teaser poster for Season 3, he holds a smoothie or something. Fucking milkshake from McDonald's. I don't know. McRonald's. And it's like, well, this is gonna be the new era. Which means we make a huge time jump. I expected there to be some more eras in between, but this is what's gonna come next, and maybe after that we'll get a space opera thing with him. I don't know. But yeah, the ending was okay. Parts of it were good, but the way getting there was a really mixed bag for this season. Mm-hmm. A lot of it I didn't like. Some parts I was okay with. The ending, like I said, I liked. And, bits and pieces here and there. Interesting setup, interesting potential for some of the characters. Pretty much none of it was used in a proper way and to the full extent that it could have been used to. There was a lot of wasted potential in this season, and I don't know if it's just because of this being a shoddy adaptation or if the manga had the same problem. I have no idea. But yeah, this season did not turn out the way I wanted it to turn out, and I hope the third season is gonna be better again. I hope it's gonna have better animation, and I hope it's gonna have more tight character development and storytelling, and more even pacing. I hope they're gonna return to what season 1 was. I don't know if that will happen. Maybe if Brain Space takes over again, who knows? But yeah, I'm gonna watch the third season either way. But I hope we're gonna get something better than this season. I didn't hate it, and I don't think you hated it either. But it was just, in a lot of parts, it was a letdown, in my opinion. How did you feel about it, just as a whole?
I feel like the best word that springs to mind to describe this season is frustration.
Yes.
Because it could have been better than it was, but there's so many weird decisions in the plot. There's so many weird decisions in the actual execution of the adaptation. It hardly ever looks good. Acceptable, I feel like I should say.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. I don't know if I hate this. I don't know if I like it. I don't know how I feel about it one way or the other.
I don't hate.
But who knows? Maybe the story that comes after this is really good.
Maybe.
But that means the recommendation comes with a huge caveat because this middle part is not great.
Yeah, that's true. Especially when compared to what a nice surprise season 1 was, right?
Yeah.
That like blew us away. Me anyway. Where it's like I got something I didn't expect. I got a great mix of an introspective character drama with an incredible hook and some good action scenes on the side, which is like, hey, wow, okay, I did not expect to get this. I think the weakest part was the final arc, and that was still good. And yeah, incredibly strong antagonists in certain ways, incredibly off-putting, and just great characters, great character stories. And this season didn't have anything like that. It didn't have a super strong antagonist that you could fully hate. Like you could hate Hayase. Like Kako is problematic, but I didn't hate him. He was just like,
Yeah, Kako kind of goes back and forth between like, okay, you're an idiot kid, to,
yeah,
I guess you're all right too. Okay, no, you're really an idiot kid.
Yeah, right. So you never really got impact. You never really know how to feel about him. I couldn't engage as much with this season.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't bored by it. I wouldn't say that, even though there were some parts where the pacing did crawl to a halt, really. But it was still like, okay, this is semi-interesting, I guess, but also, when are you gonna do anything substantial with it? And they never do, really.
I was gonna say, the answer is never.
Yeah. And that's, especially when you, again, look at the first season, how well they pulled it off there. It's like, you're mainly sitting there the entirety of season 2 and like, what happened? What happened here? Like, this is not what we got in the first season. Like, there are glimpses here and there, but it's like someone took over and wrote a completely different thing. But the mangaka is staying the same. The series composition and scriptwriter is staying the same for this. So what happened here? It's like, is this all the fault of the direction? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't understand. But something went wrong. Something went wrong with the story, the way it was handled, the way it was adapted. I don't know, some of those. And that's a shame, because I liked the first season a lot. And this I did not. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it. Definitely not. I liked parts of it. But yeah, bummer. Anyway, sorry. If you still want to watch this, where can people watch it, John? I think Crunchyroll?
Yeah, Crunchyroll. Probably everywhere else, too. Yes, Crunchyroll, and then, depending on where you live, you'll be able to watch it. It's on a ton of streaming services. It's tough, really, what to say in the end about Season 2 of 2 Year Eternity, because we don't, without having read the manga, we don't know what comes next about how good or bad it is. But, you know, that also comes down to, like we said, execution. That said, that really makes this current season a hard recommend, especially after how great the first one was. But if you really want to see the continued adventures of our immortal, it's there and you can check it out, and it's on a billion streaming services, so have yourself a look.
Alright, yeah, the 6th season of My Hero Academia. I was not anticipating to do a full review of this because, as already established in the past, we didn't want to really do those anymore for continued season, because usually this turns into us just reciting the plot without having someone to talk about said plot. It becomes more of a monologue thing than a lot of my reviews anyway turn into in general. So we try to avoid that. But on this season, I had a lot of thoughts for several reasons. So I felt like a full review was in order. So continued season review, full spoilers, of course, again. Let me preface all this by saying, oh boy, John, did you ever make the wrong decision to jump ship before this season? Holy cow.
Look, there's a lot of other stuff to watch too, so.
I know, but I understand your reasoning after season 5, but should have waited one more season, is all I'm saying. But yeah, I didn't want to do full reviews for continuing season anymore, but for this, I have to talk about the whole shebang, kinda, because so much important stuff happens in this stellar season. And this is a stellar season, in my opinion. This is probably on par with season 3, which is the best season so far of My Hero Academia, in my opinion. In certain parts, it's not as good, but in other parts, it surpasses it. So on that level, it's probably the same once you look at all parts of it. But yeah, right from the get-go, this is like everything that we were missing from season 5. It just goes all in. Because thanks to Hawk's intel, the heroes already have devised a plan to take out the newly formed Paranormal Liberation Front under now the leadership of Tomura. And it's a fully staffed 2-team attack. Like, Endeavor's team is to capture Garaki, like the weird Dr. Robotnik lookalike that is about to unleash Tomura's full potential in the course of a month. The other team will attack the hotel that is the current base of the Liberation Front. And of course, it doesn't go as planned, and shit hits the fan. We get a couple of new cool characters from the Hero Front that we have seen before, like in the hero ranking presentation, everything, like Mirko, the bunny lady, who is super cool. And she's like a hard-hitting super fighter, basically, close combat. And there's some cool fights of her against the Nomus. Very visceral, violent fights that I did not expect from her, but holy shit, she can hit hard. And according to her quick description, she does bunny things even better than actual bunnies. I leave that uncommented. I said my piece on that in the sneak peek, I think, and what all of that might or might not entail. But yeah, we get some fights of her against the high-end Nomus, and those are great. The new OP is great, going all in on the onomatopoeia, and it's a cool thing. Jiro and Kaminari are apparently now a thing, because there's some sparks flying there in more ways than one, so that's interesting. So we get some relationship evolution on our main characters, which we also wanted from the 5th season and didn't necessarily get all of that. But yeah, a lot of shit goes down immediately, like in the first half of this season. There are a lot of characters taken out of the show in one way or another, and you know what that can mean and will mean. I won't say who these characters are, but expect a lot of people being at least severely hurt at best. And there are a couple of characters that definitely have been around for a while, and there were some really harrowing moments where it's like that fucked me up good, like in the season, which was kind of what I was missing from the previous outings, like 4 and 5. Was like, yeah, this is good, at least partially to me, but I was still missing the stakes. I think you were also missing some stakes in certain regards.
Yes,
this season has this in spades. Like, the stakes have never been higher. There's so much shit happening, and a lot of that shit is terminal. So it happens as it must happen, right? Because Tomura is prepared to become like the ultimate warrior for the Liberation Front, and he awakens, though be it incomplete, but he goes full Tetsuo from Akira on everyone. Red Cape included, actually. He unleashes his powered-up decay quirk and instantly destroys a huge part of the city. And a couple of heroes while he's at it. It's incredibly well directed. It's a terrifying scene. It's a sight to behold, and it's really magnificent. Like, Bones goes all out on that shit. It's like one of the things that have been teased in the previous season, season 5, when he unleashes his full power, right, and destroys this weird offshoot hero city that they're at, but this is a much grander scale, and it hits like the entirety of the city that has been our main setting for so long. And it's terrifying. And to see him at almost full power and what he can already do with that, even though he's incomplete, is just, this is a real supervillain. And not only have his powers increased, he now also has all the quirks, all for one, stockpiled at his disposal, and he has the increased physical abilities of the top grade Nomos. Like, he's a true monster. The only thing left for him before destroying everything is getting the one great power his master couldn't get his hands on, and it, of course, is One for All. So he's going after who else but Deku, Midoriya, while the other heroes are desperately trying to overwhelm him with numbers. And shit is tense. Like, you cannot imagine how tense shit gets once Tomura has actually set his sight on Deku. And the only one who can make even a dent in Shigaraki's power is, of course, Eraserhead. So the heroes are busy protecting him as well and making sure that that Tomura doesn't snatch up Midoriya at the same time. So this is a battle on multiple fronts at this point after shit goes absolutely haywire. And what's interesting is that Shigaraki seems to be taken over by the remnant will of All for One he inherited with his powers. He tries to mentally emancipate himself and, determines for himself that it is his own power now and he will follow his own goals. But due to several reasons, I doubt that he's actually able to pull through with that, and that All for One might win out again, and that the future goal is to pull him actually out of there and get him out under All for One's grasp, which could have always been his trajectory, given what we learned about him and his origin in Season 5 and everything. But yeah, a bunch of, the battle becomes bigger and bigger because Shigaraki also reactivates Gigantomachia, of course, and something you wanted from the previous season, Sean, and you were wondering, why did we spend so much time on the training missions and everything, and the weird fight between Class 1A and 1B and stuff like that, throwing all these characters at us? The reason is, now all of these characters have to work together to stop Gigantomachia. Even the training session in Season 5 that we both kind of hated because it didn't progress the story at all and not really the character development at all. But all these characters are part of the effort to stop him, and since we have already met them, they are not just faceless heroes now to us. So this, again, stakes, and it works really well. I like that a lot. And also, this battle comes with its own set of tragedies and losses and everything. So, like I said, it's just, stakes have never been higher. We learn a lot more about Shigaraki than we initially knew. That Shigaraki's grandma, aka Gran Torino's pupil and All Might's teacher, decided to abandon her child to protect him from All for One. And ironically, this led to the creation of All for One's successor in her own grandson. And there's a great emotional flashback scene between her and Gran Torino, where we see Gran Torino in full buff form, which we have rarely seen since, he's the small grandpa Mega Man looking guy. And it's cool to see that, and also sad to see that background and what her decision led to and everything. There's a bunch of shit happening in the later part of this battle that I don't want to give away if you're still maybe going to watch this, John. But let's just say, again, some of these things you won't see coming. And they hit me hard. Important development in regards to the character relationship between Bakugo and Midoriya, which is also something that they progressed to a certain point and then put a stop to it a bit. But he finally admits that he bullied Midoriya because he couldn't deal with his own weakness, which is, of course, an important part. And when All for One takes over Shigaraki's body, Bakugo, just like Deku, when he rushed to save him from the slime villain, doesn't hesitate and pushes Deku out of his way in a very important situation. So they become kind of more of a parallel to each other than they were before. And it's really interesting. And I like what the show did with them in this season. We get more of this later on. All of this kind of culminates with all of these different parties converging, the leagues of villains, Shigaraki, the heroes, the leftover heroes, leads to the big reveal of this season, which I can talk about because you already spoiled that for yourself.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And that is that the League of Villains fire guy, Dabi, reveals himself to be Endeavor's firstborn son, Toya.
Yep.
You knew that.
Yep, because I was looking something up, and it was like, oh yeah, he's also this. And I was like, God, the internet at large. The internet at large has still not gotten down the idea of spoiler tags.
But John, let me say this. I also suspected this after you made that remark, because you spoiled that you got spoiled that for you, and then you said, I know who he is. And I was like, okay, so he's another person probably that we know of. Who else is there who handles fire?
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, oh, he's got to be from Endeavor's family. He's got to be. And he's the only one we haven't seen yet is the son that ostensibly died. So it's got to be Toya. So I also wasn't surprised by this, but that scene works incredibly well, because what was one of the main plot lines that was put more into the forefront of the previous seasons. That was Endeavor's story, right? His whole family tragedy, the stuff with all his son, how he ruined his family basically with his obsession and everything. And we were always like, it's good he's trying to make amends, but we still want him not to get out of this so easily. That would be too easy to do that. I mean, that was one of my important things. I was like, okay, I want you to actually confront your sins, quote unquote, but I also want to see what you actually did and not just apologize and move on. And this is what's happening in this season. Like, all of his sins finally come back to haunt him. Again, I always wanted him to make massive amends, which he has started to do, but it's always nice to see him get completely emotionally annihilated when Dabi reveals himself as Toya and lets the whole world know about the dirty laundry of his family. With a single well-placed broadcast mixing truth and lie convincingly enough to sow doubt and mistrust among the populace, Dabi/Toya has probably done more damage to the image of heroes than Stain or Shigaraki ever could. Because he basically says, like, hey, I'm the product of the number one hero. And technically, it's all Endeavor's fault. You reap what you sow. Mm-hmm. And Dabi is so getting off on mocking his father and his brother while fighting them. He has gone completely insane, and he's loving every minute of it. It's terrifying and horrible to see this done to Shoto, but it's also very thrilling to watch. It's a tense scene, it's a tense season, even up to that point, and we're not even done yet. It's the season of payoffs. It's like a lot of stuff that was built up in the previous seasons, even in parts where we're like, what are they trying to do here? It feels like they're just treading water. It feels like they're not doing anything. But a lot of those parts come back in this season and get finally paid off with important scenes. And one of the most important plot lines is the stuff with the Endeavor family. And I love that. I thought that was great and was so happy. They're going a bit overboard with the last-minute clutch moment character appearances at the end of this first half of the sixth season, but it's entertaining as all heck. It's like a lot of heck yeah, fist in the air moments, but I was like, okay, all right. It's like Smash Brothers. Everyone is here. Yeah. But it's cool. It's like eroding. It's like crowd pleasing in certain parts, especially because all of this that happens before these last couple of scenes is so tense and so terrifying and harrowing and everything. And yeah, so I like that too. One of the main themes, and this, funnily enough, relates to. That's why I said this is the episode about immortality. A big theme that already was teased in the previous seasons with All for One and everything, is the show is very intent on stating that inheriting a will and forcing your will on others are very different things. That choice is everything. Just like, with Fushi's friends in the review of To Your Eternity just a moment ago, chose to stay by his side and thus, I guess, become immortal in their own right. Here, choice is also everything. Like, Deku chose to accept All Might's proposition of becoming his successor, But both Endeavor and All for One try to artificially extend their legacy by forcing their will on others. Endeavor did it by torturing his family to create his ultimate prodigy that could carry the family name and become the number one hero if Endeavor wasn't able to succeed becoming the number one hero himself. All for One takes it one step further by literally engineering a new vessel in the form of Shigaraki, born from tragedy and manipulated into becoming a pawn in All for One's game. Endeavor was content with living his dreams and gaining immortality through someone else fulfilling them, which is sinister enough. But All for One wants true immortality with no regards to the person that considers him something like a father figure whatsoever. Like, again, true monster. Like a horrible, horrible person. We knew that, but this season really emphasizes that and shows you all the terrifying aspects of that. And the heroes managed to capture most of the Paranormal Liberation Front's members, I guess, but the price is very high for that. Lots of heroes died, even more normal people did, and the big city is left in ruins. I appreciate that the show is taking at least half an episode to see the heroes trying to save some survivors from the rubble. Ochako and Tsuyu among those who are doing their darndest to save some souls. They even show heroes losing hope and giving up in face of all this horror, which is a rare thing we've seen in this show. Like, just these ideal heroes just giving up. But that shows you how dire the situation is after this grand battle against the Paranormal Liberation Front. All for One, by way of Shigaraki's body, is taking the leftover league of villains to free his real body from prison. Or rather, he does it himself with Shigaraki's body and the high-end Nomus. He also frees some familiar faces like Muscular, Moonfish, and Overhaul. The freed villains respectively attack other prisons and free more members of All for One's new army, all while the heroes are reduced to licking their wounds. So this is all kind of gearing up towards, hey, we're going into the finale direction. Or that's what it feels like anyway, because I heard the manga is still going, and I wonder how much more there is to tell, because all of this, what is happening in this season, feels like, oh, we're actually putting the work in to set the stage for the finale here. And this finale will be destroying All for One and getting Shigaraki back, maybe, and trying to help him regain his humanity. So I wonder what's going to happen in the future seasons. But yeah, All for One intends to completely take over Shigaraki's body and transforming it and everything. There were some cool side aspects of this, like considering My Hero Academia is such a propaganda show. They're willing to let the prison guards in the super villain prison say some really vile shit in regards to the people with quirks that have been deemed villains by the Hero Society. The series made a big deal in the previous seasons about showing how thin the line between hero and villain can be, but there are definitely some people in this world that don't see it that way. So that was a neat aspect, because kind of the show often, I feel like, refrained from being political in a way, but in this season it actually tried its hand at some of that, especially when it comes to the image of heroes and what this ideal actually means, and what it means to live this ideal, and what it means for people to actually strive for that, and people who take it seriously, and people who take it too seriously, and people who pervert this ideal. We see Hawk's shitty childhood and why Endeavor as a hero was so important to him. And that was also really cool, because so far we didn't really know that much about Hawks, but his background story is pretty good, and it completely makes his dedication to Endeavor understandable. A guy we didn't really sympathize with up to this point, but he has a different meaning for Hawks. Let's just leave it at that. And that's really, really cool and really well pulled off. And we get more interesting stuff on the whole Endeavor family thing, because Endeavor also gets hurt big time in the battle. He then gets visited by his family in the hospital, and finally verbalizes his regret and says that everything he has done wrong is coming back to haunt him, and that he is sorry. Finally, he's even crying about it.
About time.
About fucking time, man. And I promise you, if you decide to watch it, it will be rewarding seeing that. Like, it's time because you realize, okay, now it's time for family therapy, so the family can rebuild and get Toya back.
It's been time.
It's been overdue, for fuck's sake. And I was worried the show wouldn't get here, but it does, and it feels very rewarding. But first, of course, we learn how all this family tragedy actually came to be. And I don't know if I should give that away, but since you know that Toya is already Dabi and everything, I guess I can. And it's it's different seeing that on the screen. You know, Toya, just like his siblings, was Endeavor's attempt to spawn a designer baby that would combine his fire quirk with his wife's ice quirk and eventually suppress All Might. However, all the attempts before Shoto were unsuccessful. Toya, being the firstborn son, got a more powerful fire quirk, but his body is actually more attuned to the cold quirk, which in a cool twist of fate means he can tolerate cold much better than heat, which also means that with his fire being stronger than that of his father, every time he uses it, he's basically burning himself alive. And his flame being stronger than his father's is also extended to his will. He is so intent to please his father, to be recognized by him, to fulfill Endeavor's wish to suppress All Might, that he won't hesitate to hurt himself to improve his power. And this gets only worse once Shoto is born, of course, since he is Endeavor's dream child. Now, to be fair, Endeavor makes some attempts at reining Toya in, but to no effect, and the show thankfully doesn't shift the blame to Toya either. Toya says multiple times, "You have lit that fire under me, Dad. I'm like you. I can't just stop." And let's be honest, Toya is a tough kid to deal with. He is so rightfully unhappy with the situation that he lashes out at everyone because he feels like abandoned trash. His mom doesn't help him because she's afraid of her husband and doesn't know how to get through to Toya, so he loses trust in her and pushes her away. The person he opens up to the most is his brother Natsu, but Natsu is a kid and understandably doesn't want to listen to Toya's progressively fanatic rants about their dad being what's wrong with today's heroes and the woman in their family being useless. His little sister is, well, his little sister he can't relate to. And Shoto is an ever-present reminder of what his father wants him to be, but what he thinks he can never achieve. And that situation can drive a kid mad, and the show makes no qualms about what, and most importantly, who makes Toya act out. So it's like there were some easy traps here, like where it's like, hey, this kid was just a difficult kid, and Endeavor is not really to blame. No. The show definitely says, like, Endeavor, you fucked this up. You made the mistake here. You didn't care enough. You didn't pay attention enough. You were so focused on creating your legacy that you are responsible for this. Now, if Endeavor had put in some serious father-son time with Toya, talked to him, took his efforts seriously, supported him, showed him some genuine affection, in short, if he had been a goddamn parent, I'm convinced this all could have been avoided. But like the weak sauce dipshit he is, he runs away from the responsibility, takes refuge in his work, isolates Shoto from the rest of the kids, because he thinks this way he can control them and not lose his grip on him like he lost his grip on Toya, puts all the burden of fixing Toya on his wife, which of course she crumbles under, which results in her hurting Shoto. You know, the thing we saw in the first season where she throws the cooking pot at him, what leaves him with the scar. And the cherry on top of this family tragedy avalanche/wildfire is Toya losing control of his power and burning himself so bad that his gradual descent into madness instigated by his negligent dad is finalized and he becomes the villain we know as Dabi. It's sad, it's disturbing, it's tragic, and it feels real, man. I did not believe the superhero anime could pull off believable family drama, but goddamn did it ever. It's so good. It's so good and feels so realistic, weirdly enough. I wasn't believing my eyes, but it was there. It was really well done. It was really well directed. It was incredibly acted. And it got enough time to simmer and make you really feel for these characters. Even for Endeavor at that point, even though the show, like I said, never makes any qualms about him being the responsible factor here. And yeah, let me repeat and elaborate on what I said earlier when I compared All Might, Endeavor, and All for One. Endeavor at this point in his life didn't actually want to be a father. He didn't want children. He wanted a legacy. His kids were just his method to achieve that. He wanted to live his dreams through his children. He's one of those assholes who name their kids after themselves because they are afraid of dying and hope something like that will immortalize them. Or one of those shitty parents who get their kids into a profession they couldn't succeed in just so they can have success through the potential success of their children. They don't care about their kids or about what they want. They only care about themselves. They are like vampires who feast on lives of their children to being able to cope with their own mortality and imperfections. And there are so many people out there that treat their kids like that, which makes this also believable. And only in recent seasons, because of his conversation with All Might and some of the young heroes and his family, has the man Endeavor taken some small steps toward turning his life around and becoming less of a goddamn asshole. And the irony in all of this is that he actually became the number one hero for a while, regardless. Something he could have never imagined because he considered All Might this indomitable obstacle that he'd never be able to surpass in his lifetime. Well, at least when it comes to hero rankings, you did, Endeavor, and it probably would have happened either way without you having to fuck up the lives of so many people. Good job. That is such a sad irony behind all of this. It's like, and that's what good drama is, in my opinion. It's like you see the building blocks of this, you see how this happened, and it's believable that this happened, but it didn't have to happen. It was only due to the folly of man that all of this shit had to happen. Now, the rest of the family takes some responsibility as well, but more in the way of we fucked up because we were too afraid or didn't pay enough attention, but still confirming multiple times that Endeavor is the one who started all this, and he has to justifiably shoulder most of the blame, but not all of it, because he can't. Because after all this, he is still human. And if this flashback has shown us anything, it's that he is too much of a bitch to deal with this alone. So his family will support him, not for his sake or to absolve him of anything, but to get Toya back. Because Endeavor can't do it by himself. It's so good. And it's exactly what I wanted out of this storyline. I didn't expect that the show could deliver such potent character drama and development, but man, I rarely have been so glad to be so wrong. It's great stuff. And I really recommend you watch the 6th season for that alone. Everyone who's listening to this. It's great. We get some more good stuff with Deku at the tail end of this season. He is now able to converse with the previous holders of One for All in his dreams. Like, he learns that due to certain mechanics, One for All can only be inherited by quirkless people at this point, which means that he might be the very last user of this immense power. And we have Nana Shimura, the grandmother of Tomura, and the other previous users ask Deku to kill Tomura because they think he's irredeemable. This coming from Nana is incredibly disturbing because it's her grandson after all, but of course it's a trick to test Deku's conviction. He says he thinks One for All isn't a power for killing, and he'll find a different way, and thus passes the test. And the way this is portrayed is pretty cool, because in his dreams, Deku is not really able to properly talk. He can only mumble, except for the moment where he explains why he wants to save Tomura, and why he thinks that he is different from the other villains he encountered. He also turns into his child version as well when he says, I want to save that kid, which shows that this is a pure conviction on his end. I really like the way they framed this and how this spoke to Deku's real heroic sensibilities and, you know, his idealism. And it's a real cementation of his character and what he is and why he is geared to be the number one hero. And the last battle has, of course, done irreparable damage to the image of heroes in the city, even with Endeavor going public with his family history and trying to salvage some of the public's lost trust. Still, things are looking really grim because they don't think they can trust or rely on heroes anymore. Like, the normal citizens form militias that try to take down villains themselves, which leads to the rise of xenophobia and witch hunts. Likewise, some of the heroes get disillusioned by the backlash and decide to quit. So really not a good time for anyone at all. And Deku leaves UA to not put his friends in danger. Kind of, again, a parallel to Fushi, right, at the beginning of Season 2 of To Eternity. The city is in ruins, and the villains that escape from prison run rampant, which leads to a short but neat rematch between Deku and Muscular. And it's cool to see Deku integrate every One for All power in his battle strategies now, and he finally gets to wear his mask, also Gran Torino's scarf, which is a snazzy look. And yeah, since All for One is busy completing on taking over Tomura's body, he sends a literal hired gun to collect Deku. The sniper lady Nagant. Their fight is pretty cool, and she has an interesting connection to Hawks. since she is a former hero who was used by the Safety Commission to do dirty hit jobs to establish the current hero society. Again, is one of those aspects where the show gets a bit more political and makes the whole hero society thing more of a gray area, where it's like this ideal of the hero society clashing against the reality where, no, this was all established partially by bad people. And that was also an interesting aspect. And it makes Deku realize he has to also know these dark aspects to be able to properly empathize with people like Tomura, who have a grudge against this kind of society, to reach and save them. The problem is, just like Fushi in the second season of To Your Eternity, Deku puts everything on himself. He is shouldering the burden of stopping the prison escapees, the League of Villains, and All for One and Shigaraki. Of course, this quickly takes its toll, as it was. He doesn't let his body heal up properly. His costume is all tattered and torn, and that former bright, optimistic, passionate gaze from earlier seasons has been replaced by a piercing, driven stare. He looks more like a villain or an actual monster every passing day, which of course hurts All Might to see the most, because he promised Deku's mom and himself that he would take care of the boy. A promise that he is now failing to fulfill, which makes sense. He's just like Deku, always putting the needs of others before himself. So how can he even get through to someone who has been trying to copy his mantra the entire time? It's not really possible, because just Deku is trying to be like him, like All Might all the time. But Bakugo, of all people, is the only one who immediately realizes this, because he knows Deku and All Might both very well. All Might is also his hero. Deku is his rival, so to speak. And in a disturbing way, this is mirroring the relationship between Endeavor and Toya. Two kids just wanting to be like their dads, and one being destroyed by it through his dad's neglect, the other also on the brink of destroying himself because his adopted dad, while trying his hardest, also didn't pay close enough attention to the trajectory his young protege/adopted son was on. I like that there are a lot of character dynamics that are echoes of another in this season and in the series in general. I think you had some problems with that in Demon Slayer in the second season, where there was some dark mirror stuff going on with some of the characters. But I feel like here in this season it plays really well, because we have the whole underlying theme of legacy and fathers and sons and shitty parents, right? And this season puts off it really well to put some parallels in the show. And yeah, thankfully, when Deku is at his lowest and in danger of being overwhelmed, his friends finally show up. Bakugo front and center, of course, because he's probably the only one who can punch some sense into Deku at this point. But it's great to see the entirety of Class A turn up for their friend, even if Deku doesn't want their help. They intend to bring him back to the school and fight this fight together with him. It's a really badass full circle moment. Like the destined ultimate hero being ultimately saved by all the people he helped before and all the friends he made. Again, nice parallel to Your Eternity Season 2, but much more well pulled off here. Especially also in the animation department. Let's not forget that, because this is a really good looking season. I love that Bakugo is like, you can't even smile right now, you All Might wannabe, so this ain't it, chief. It's basically what he's saying. I'm paraphrasing, but it's like he really has the high ground at this point. And it's really nice to see all of Class A plead with Deku to rely on them. We see a lot of flashbacks to earlier interactions that meant a lot to each of his classmates and that show how he has enriched their lives. And now they want to be the ones to do something for him, even if he doesn't want them to. And it also makes some of the more low-key episodic moments and arcs from earlier seasons feel a lot more rewarding, because now those were not just filler, but time he spent with his classmates that fortified their bonds, which now is paid off in full. Again, this is the season of payoffs. We have Ida throwing words back at Deku that Deku used when saving Ida from Stain, which feels incredibly cathartic, and is only topped by Bakugo finally, and for everyone to hear, admitting that he felt threatened by Deku's spirit and bullied him because he wanted to feel superior to him. And he finally fucking apologizes. Fucking finally.
Wild.
Wild.
That's crazy.
I never expected this to happen. This has been a long time coming, and it staged really well. I clapped. He finally said the thing. That's how I responded. When he said, I'm sorry, I said, hey, he said the thing. Bakugo said the thing. Can't believe it. But yeah, not all is well yet, because the evacuees taking refuge in UA at the moment do not want Deku to be there, because he is the target for Shigaraki and puts them all in danger by coming back there. So it's finally time for one of our most underused characters up to this point, Ochako, to shine and deliver a passionate speech to sway the worried masses by appealing to their humanity and showing them that heroes are also only people as well, which is another great moment in the season, especially when some people from the crowd finally take heart and run towards Deku to show him compassion. I won't say who these people are. One of them is a familiar face, which we haven't seen for a while, but it's really good. And Deku is promising he will get it all back to these people, reinstilling trust in the most vocal critics. And one by one, the crowd is deciding to show some civil courage and to let that young hero who is still a kid rest and recover in their midst. And then we get the quote, "This is the moment that I became the greatest hero, the moment that everyone became the greatest hero." Fine full circle moment to the beginning of the fucking show. We just assumed it meant something different back then. But Deku's biggest achievement and already his most important legacy, because this show is also all about legacy, positive and negative, from this moment onward was never to save everyone on his own, but to give everyone, heroes and normal citizens alike, in such a time of loss, the courage to come together on the same level and work hand in hand as one people. And with this, he already has become a better version of All Might. All Might chose to be the ultimate shining beacon the people could look up to and put all their hopes on and rely on to ease their worries. And he definitely inspired a lot of people to strive for his ideal, like Deku and Bakugo, our most central characters, for example. But he was also a crutch for the normal people and this whole society and system. A shield to ward off evil, but also a trap. A god among men. He stood above everything and in front of everyone, and that's the image he projected by default on other heroes, which made the public become over-reliant on them, and the heroes in turn elitist, controlling, and in certain cases corrupt and power-hungry. And of course, once he wasn't there anymore to fulfill that important role, that this whole system was built on, it had to fail and crumble, obviously. Because it was a sham, kinda. But Deku, by showing them his vulnerable, broken side from the get-go, asking for their help and support because he can't save the day without them, will, when he ultimately prevails, propagate a way healthier form of inspiration because he is not positioning himself above the common man and woman. He is just one of them. He's just a kid. He's gonna become the greatest hero, and so can you. Because he's the same as you and I. That's some good shit, man. That's the kind of pathos I want in my superhero stories. That's some good Spider-Man shit. Put it into my veins. It's really great. And you won't believe who gets All Might out of his funk in all of this. I'm not gonna say it either, but it's a swerve, man. That's some Oda One Piece level of bringing back stuff from earlier in this show. It's ridiculous. And yeah, that's also great. It's a nice aside at the end of the season, and it ends with one of the coolest things, like Bakugo calls Deku Izuku for the first time in the fucking show. I'm so happy I can't even put it into words. And yeah, the final episode this season is appropriately titled "No Man is an Island." Cherish your friends, everybody. Also a theme of this episode, because this is also a big part of To Your Eternity, Season 2, and Season 1, I would say. And it's definitely one of this whole runtime of My Hero Academia, but especially this 6th season. And now, the final battle draws near, and I couldn't be more excited. After the somewhat mixed outings of Season 4 and 5, I was a bit worried if My Hero Academia would find its footing again and could return to its former heights. And boy, did it ever. Like, what a stellar season. I hope the 7th will be just as good, and I wonder if it will be the last one? Like I said, considering the manga is still running, I doubt it, and I hope Bones won't go for an original ending. They have done this before, so we'll see. But I really loved this season. I thought it was great. It was everything that I hoped for we would finally get, and we didn't have since season 3, and it felt so worth it. It was riveting from beginning to end. I feel like there was no dead air in this season. Like every episode had something interesting to say. And we got some great payoffs and resolution to character stories. First and foremost, the Endeavor family stuff was really good. The stuff with, we learn about the background of Shigaraki and the goal All for One has. And of course, the stuff with Deku, where he is at risk at losing himself at the end and then turning it all around and basically inspiring society to become better, to be better by being actually just himself and just by being human and not a hero. And that's all such good stuff. That's all such like the pinnacle of superhero stories in more ways than one. I couldn't have hoped for this. I did not expect this to happen this season, but I was so fucking hyped. And I'm still hyped after watching this. And I know I've given away a lot of stuff in this review, but I still would say to everyone out there, even if you haven't seen it yet, watch it, because this is definitely the best My Hero Academia has been in a long time, if not ever. Like I said, it's probably overall on the same level as Season 3. Season 3 maybe had some parts that were more well animated in this. There were some great moments where that maybe flew even a bit higher, like the scene with Muscular and Deku is still my highlight moment, like where he finds his power and pushes Muscular back. That was just, in terms of presentation, was just perfect. I don't know if the season has a moment in this that was as perfect. Same for them saving Bakugo. Again, music, animation was so perfect in that moment. I don't feel like we get something like that where the whole presentation works together perfectly in conjunction with the story. But what is there in the story department here is just so potent and so good that it shines brighter than some of the parts in Season 3 that were just relying on the cool battles and the great animation. Don't get me wrong, the battle in the first half of this is incredible, and all the shit that is happening, and the stakes are so fucking high, but still, you know, the character parts are the important things in this season, and they are the things that really work well, and all the themes that come to fruition and everything, and all the payoffs that we get here. It's done so well, and I love this season. I thought it was great. And yeah, John, I hope I have convinced you to maybe give this another look, even though I gave a lot of stuff away. Some of that you, already knew. But if not for any of you out there, I hope I can say the same thing about Season 7 again when I maybe do a full review of that. I don't know if I will. But I love this season. I thought it was great. And I am fully back on board on the My Hero Academia train again. And I hope Horikoshi doesn't betray my newfound trust in his writing skills and doesn't drag out the story too much. Because this feels like now is a really good moment to get ready for ending this. And I hope he does so and doesn't, like I said, drag this out anymore, because I don't feel like, aside from the Shigaraki story that needs to be wrapped up and that we might get a bit more on, we have that much more interesting character stuff now to tell for these characters. I could be wrong. There could always be more that he finds that could be interesting to tell. But a lot of the stuff that was set up from the get-go has now been paid off and has been brought to a good conclusion. The only things left are the Endeavor family getting their son back, getting him out of the clutches of the League of Villains and out of, the grasp of insanity, and Deku doing the same for Tomura Shigaraki. And aside from that, I think you could wrap that up in one season. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I have high hopes. We'll see if they get betrayed or fulfilled. But I'm optimistic right now because this season was just so goddamn good. So yeah, with that being said, talking about good things, there's still one more thing we have to do for this episode. Best of the season! Alright, yeah, best of the season. Okay, it was a pretty short season for us, John, because we only had 3 episodes.
Yeah.
But we had some good shows. the first episode we talked about Trigun Stampede, and I didn't know where to put this in, because after watching Trigun Stampede, I also went back and watched the old Trigun show, which was really fun and was really interesting and made me see how different these shows are. I feel like after watching all of this, both have good and bad aspects. Stampede has the superior presentation and a more focused plot-driven pacing, but the pacing is also what makes it feel a bit rushed at times, and it's missing a lot of the humor and meticulous world building the old show has. Likewise, the old show occasionally treads water, and some of the comedic bits can get a bit grating at times. Also, its main bad guy gets barely any screen time, but overall, I like how it handles the other characters better, because Vash, Meryl, and Wolfwood all get more screen time to shine in the old show, especially Meryl. And let's not forget, Millie doesn't even exist in Stampede, and I like her better than Roberto. Though, to be fair, she might have felt somewhat misplaced because of Stampede's more serious tone. So, that being said, I really liked Stampede, even if it didn't do some of the stuff that I liked in the old show. I know you liked it too. Is it your best of the season, though, John? Or... I mean, we can just do, for now, like, take a look at all the shows we looked at. You liked, Stampede is a definite contender, though, right?
Yes, for sure. I think it's the front runner.
Okay.
Because, 2 Year Eternity is... No.
Sadly, no.
No.
It could have been if it was like season 1.
It had the potential, but it fumbled it every step of the way.
Yeah, that's true, sadly.
Revenger?
We had Revenger.
Revenger was good, though. I really liked that a lot.
Same.
It was a story of revenge that was really well executed, and it had, a bunch of interesting characters. And we said it before, cool to see Robochi back writing a little bit of anime again. But I don't know if it edges out Trigun.
I feel like there are some interesting aspects to it, but I feel like character-wise and story-wise and the setting and everything, all of that is a bit more interesting in Trigun. Like, even though we have seen these characters before, but also add to that the presentation, right? Revenger didn't look bad by any means, but Orange just went so hard on Trigun Stampede. Like, make us believe that at someday anime, CG anime can all look like this, maybe, is just something that, this is giving us hope. So, yeah, that I don't know. I thought the new way the story turns the story took in Stampede were also really interesting. Revenger tells a very interesting basic story with cool characters and everything, but I feel like Trigun Stampede just has more interesting stuff to offer on a broader scale, like in general. In the character department, in the world department, in the presentation department, like everything is a bit more, I don't know, colorful. So even though I love Urobuchi's writing, and I still think in parts the dialogue is definitely better in Revenger and everything, but I still feel like Trigun is just a more interesting, I don't want to use the word product, but that's what it is. So I would also feel that it edges that out. I watched another series that you didn't watch, Blue Lock. I love Blue Lock. I thought the first season was fucking fantastic. It's between this and My Hero's Academia Season 6 for me. I gotta be honest. Because as much as I love Trigun Stampede, I had more emotions towards these shows. I'd say I enjoyed both series equally for different reasons. But My Hero Academia Season 6 just had a lot more substance than Season 1 of Blue Lock, which despite its solid character work was mostly a fun popcorn show for me, a really good one. But My Hero Academia this season delivered a lot more food for thought and wrapped up or started wrapping up a lot of loose threads from the beginning of the show and did so many good payoffs. And since I always had a bit of leftover regret for not choosing Season 3 of My Hero Academia as my best of the season back then, considering it fell off a bit after that one, I'm glad that I think I can finally wholeheartedly embrace an outing of this show as my top candidate. So, thinking about it, I have been thinking about it a while, because I like all of these shows. I like Trigun, I liked Blue Lock, and I liked Revenger, and I liked My Hero Academia Season 6. Didn't as much like To Your Eternity, sadly. But all of these could have been contenders any seasons. But this season, and because I feel like I'm so happy that the show is back and came back like with a big fanfare and everything, I think My Hero Academia 6 edges out Blue Lock ultimately and Trigun. Both great shows. Same for Trigun. Don't forget, maybe you want to watch the old show, revisit the old show if you've only seen Stampede, because I think it has its merits, just like I detailed. Both shows do their own thing in different ways and have very valid reasons for existing. One doesn't replace the other. And so you should definitely check both out if you're interested in that universe. Revenger was also fun. Really solid crime story with good character work. Blue Lock is just hype moments to show. But My Hero Academia Season 6 is hype moments to show. Also payoffs to show. Also great character drama to show. It has a lot going for it this season. And I just want to give it finally, if it might be the last chance, depending on how Season 7 might turn out. I don't know. Maybe they go back to being a bit of a letdown. I don't want to believe it after the stellar season, but who knows? So I'm going to take my chance and finally put a My Hero Academia season as my best of the season, because otherwise I won't be happy anymore. I will be a sad person. So, yes, I'm very intent on doing that. So, my pick for best of the season is My Hero Academia Season 6. How about you, John? Have you made a decision?
Yeah, I'll go with Trigun. I feel like,
all right.
I've said it before, this show about us having our cake and eating it too, so.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Because, I do still like Revenger, but I think all the points you made about Trigun are true, and it just kind of pushes it that little bit further.
Yeah, and especially, still watch Revenger, right? Because it's a good show, and if you're interested in a cool procedural, in an interesting setting, and with interesting characters, definitely watch that, even if it isn't our best of the season. But it's a great return of Urobuchi, and it's fun. It's a breezy, short show with a good self-contained story. I don't think we'll get another season of this, and I feel like I've seen mixed responses to this, so we want to be the positive force here and say, yeah, if you're interested in the setup of the show, definitely watch it. Definitely watch both Triguns, or at least Stampede if you don't want to deal with the longer show, or a very 90s show. Like the old Trigun is very 90s, and everything that entails, both in positive and negative.
Yes.
But it's interesting to watch both shows and compare them compare their strengths and weaknesses. I don't regret going back to the old Trigun show and watching it, because it was really interesting to see what that show did differently as Stampede, and vice versa. Like I said, Blue Lock will get another season. I'm certain of this. I don't know if that season will be as good, but I assume it will deliver the same kind of hype moments and presentation and stuff like that if they don't change studios. So Blue Lock gets another chance, absolutely, at becoming best of the season. And I thought My Hero Academia wouldn't get that chance anymore. So I'm glad that I can pick it. And you picked Trigun, which would have maybe, if Blue Lock didn't exist, would have probably been my pick. So that is probably also getting another season. Let's not forget that. So this will get another chance for me as well, probably. So yeah, interesting times to be an anime fan. And watch all of these, except for maybe To Your Eternity Season 2. Also, maybe the third season of that will be great again. Who knows? We'll see. And maybe we will reverse our decision and we'll be saying, yeah, Season 2 is a rough spot, but it's worth going through that for Season 3. We'll see. Anything can happen. But for now, these were our reviews from winter season or fall, depending on when the show started. And yeah, we will return in the not too distant future with our sneak peek for the new shows that start the summer season, which are not that many actually that we're super interested in, I think. So this might be again another slim picking, but that's also good because I'm behind on a lot of shows and I need to catch up. So
it's fine. Don't worry about it.
for not throwing a fucking anime tsunami my way again. All right, had a fun time this season. Couple of good shows, definitely, and we hope we get a couple of good more next season. And we'll definitely have some reviews for you from spring. So, see you then, and definitely stay hydrated in these hot, hot times. And that is a wrap on the 144th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in this podcast is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jake Kaufman. Please go to virt.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. Our show is available on most of the popular podcast services, but it's always worth visiting animebrainfreeze.com for our review index and more. Leave us comments and questions on YouTube, follow us on Twitter at AnyBrainFreeze, or send an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next episode. Macht's gut.
Take care, everybody. Next time on Anime Brain Freeze.
A slave to fate breaks his chains to the past.
And with his freedom, dreams of a peaceful future.